Have you ever noticed how the more you explain yourself, the less people actually hear you? It's like the more you try to clarify your intentions, the more distorted they become. You try to be honest, you try to be open, but the moment you start defending yourself, you're already losing something: power, peace, and presence. You weren't born to explain your existence. You weren't built to translate your soul for someone who refuses to listen. Most people don't want the truth. They want to feel right, and they'll use your explanations as fuel for their assumptions. There's a quiet power in withholding, not the cold kind, not the manipulative kind, but the type rooted in clarity. The kind that knows, I don't need to fix your perception to stay grounded in my own. Silence makes people nervous, especially when they're used to you justifying everything. It forces reflection. It breaks patterns. Suddenly, they don't know what story to tell without your script. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop leaking energy. You stop handing your power to people who haven't earned the right to hold it. You stop negotiating your worth like it's a bargain. Those who truly see you will never require the full explanation, and those who do were never listening, only waiting for their turn to speak. Let them misunderstand you. Let them project. Because every time you withhold, you protect something sacred: your peace. The most powerful people aren't the ones always speaking. They're the ones who know when to stay silent and let the silence say everything. Why do you feel the need to explain yourself so often? Why do you try so hard to be understood by people who have already decided not to listen? What's driving that urge to clarify, over-explain, justify? Is it guilt? Is it fear? Or is it that tiny voice inside you still begging to be accepted? Let's be honest, you weren't always like this. There was a time when your silence was natural, when you didn't carry the weight of proving yourself to people who couldn't hold space for you. So what changed? Maybe you grew up in a place where being misunderstood had consequences. Maybe being quiet meant you were overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. So you learned to fill the silence with proof, with performance, with overcorrection. And now you're exhausted, emotionally, spiritually, even physically, because trying to explain your soul to someone who only sees a fraction of you is one of the loneliest things you can do. What if you did something different? What if you stopped? Stopped trying to be the bigger person every time. Stopped clarifying what didn't need to be clarified. Stopped over-apologizing for having boundaries, for having emotions, for simply being human. What would happen if you gave people the space to draw their own conclusions and let them live with it? What would happen if you allowed misunderstanding to exist and didn't chase after it? Would they respect you more? Would they panic? Or would they leave? And if they left, what would that actually mean? What if your silence didn't cost you connection? What if it protected your peace? What if you stopped trying to be understood and started trying to be whole? This is about more than communication. It's about trust. Trusting that the people who matter will lean in and the ones who don't will fall away. We've been taught that explaining ourselves is part of being kind, that clarity is maturity, that giving people the full context somehow makes us more reasonable, more trustworthy, more safe to love. But what if that belief is exactly what's draining your power? What if over-explaining isn't generosity? It's self-abandonment. We live in a world that praises availability and compliance. You respond fast, you justify quickly, you explain everything. And they call it kindness. But the truth is, that's not kindness. It's conditioning. It's the survival pattern of someone who learned that silence gets mistaken for guilt, and guilt gets punished. You explain yourself so they don't assume the worst. You defend yourself before there's even an attack. You hope that if you just offer enough proof, they'll stop questioning you. But the more you explain, the more they demand. And suddenly, you're not being heard, you're being dissected. Here's the truth. People don't control you with force anymore. They control you with your own reactions, with your quick replies, with your guilt, with your need to be seen as good, even if it means explaining yourself into exhaustion. Every time you jump to justify yourself, you give away ground. You become predictable, accessible, controllable. You give them your emotional script, and once they have it, they can play you like a role you never asked for. You've probably been told that silence is avoidance, but that's a lie. Sometimes silence is self-respect. It's choosing not to participate in games where you're set up to lose either way. What if the most powerful version of you isn't the one who explains better, but the one who speaks less and listens more? What if the real flex isn't proving your point, but no longer needing to? You don't owe explanations to people who twist your words. You don't owe closure to people who cause the confusion, and you don't owe your clarity to people who benefit from your confusion. Let this be the shift, from reaction to intention, from over-explanation to inner stability, from the need to be understood to the courage to be misunderstood. They might call it cold, they might call it distant, but you'll call it peace. This is why healing hurts. Not because you're broken, but because you're shedding the parts of you that made other people comfortable. The moment you stop over-explaining, people notice. Not because they miss your voice, because they relied on it. They needed your emotional labor to soothe their own chaos. They needed your words to confirm their version of the story. And when you go quiet, they lose control of the narrative. Think about it. The first time you didn't respond to that guilt-loaded message, what happened? The first time you said, "I don't owe you an explanation," and meant it, how did the room shift? The moment you stopped apologizing for how you felt, the silence got louder. But it wasn't empty. It was revealing. You saw who showed up when you stopped bleeding for them. You saw who withdrew when you stopped proving yourself. You saw who panicked, not because you were unkind, but because you stopped being easy to manage. That's not love leaving. That's illusion collapsing. Let it fall. Let the silence smoke them out. Let your absence ask the questions your presence always answered. This is the emotional spike most people avoid, because it's uncomfortable to sit in the tension of being misunderstood. It's painful to not clarify when every cell in your body is screaming to fix it, to smooth it, to prove you're still good. But every time you choose not to explain, not to chase, not to clean up the emotional mess someone else created, you choose yourself. You let the silence expose the ones who were never listening. You let the distance answer the question, were they here for you? Or just the version of you that performed? If you've ever felt that gut drop when the phone stopped ringing, if you've ever seen someone's energy shift the moment you pulled back, you know exactly what this is. It's not loneliness, it's truth. If this cracked something open in you, type "I feel this" in the comments. Say it for the version of you that's finally done begging to be heard. Say it for the you that's starting to listen inward, not outward. If this is hitting home, drop a comment, even just "I choose myself." Say it out loud, say it in the comments, say it like a decision, not just a statement. Because this is the moment where you reclaim something. Not just your time or your words, but your emotional authority. The right to stop explaining yourself, the right to protect your energy, the right to let silence be enough. Comment if you've ever felt that shift. The one where you stopped defending and started observing. The one where you realized some people only loved the version of you that bled quietly, replied quickly, and explained endlessly. If you're in that shift right now, type "I choose myself." Let it be a declaration, because you're not alone in this. There are thousands of us learning how to say less and feel more, learning to sit in our truth without having to translate it. Say it for the version of you that over-explained to survive. Say it for the version of you that's learning to thrive in your silence. We're not just healing, we're awakening. And every time one of us chooses peace, the whole room gets quieter. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." But what if the reverse is also true? What if everything that causes us to over-explain, over-apologize and overreact is a reflection of what we haven't yet healed? Psychology calls it fawning, the survival response that makes you shape-shift to avoid conflict, to stay safe, to be liked. You become hyper-aware of tone. You read between every line. You rush to clarify, to soothe, to fix, even when nothing's broken. And the people around you, they get used to it. They start expecting it. Because you're over-explaining trains them to believe they're entitled to an answer, a reason, a justification. That's not emotional maturity. That's emotional programming. Freud talked about repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate unresolved dynamics from childhood. So if you had to explain yourself to be safe as a child, you'll keep doing it as an adult, to bosses, to partners, to friends. Because deep down, You still believe, if I explain enough, I'll finally be understood. And then I'll be safe. But here's the reframe. You're already safe. You don't need to earn your peace through explanation. You don't need to hand someone your entire emotional map just to justify your no, your distance, or your truth. Every time you explain yourself to someone who doesn't actually want to understand you, you leak energy, not just a little. You leak presence, you leak self-trust, you leak power. It starts small. A quick reply to clear up a tone. A long message to make sure they know you didn't mean it that way. A follow-up apology for a boundary you had every right to set. You do it because you care. You do it because you don't want to hurt anyone. You do it because deep down part of you still feels guilty for simply existing in your truth. But that guilt was taught. It was inherited. And it's draining you. This is what people don't see. Over-explaining isn't about communication. It's about survival. It's what you learned to do when being misunderstood felt dangerous. But now it's just exhausting. Every time you say yes when you mean no, just to avoid a conversation, that's energy lost. Every time you walk away and then come back with a 3-paragraph explanation to make them feel okay again, that's self-abandonment. And here's the hard part. They don't even notice. They just take. Because when you train people to expect access to your mind, your feelings, your why, they stop seeing it as a gift. You can't set boundaries while explaining yourself out of them. You can't protect your energy while narrating your every emotional move. Conserve it, guard it, because every word you don't speak becomes fuel for the fire you're building within. Here's what most people don't realize. Your emotional predictability is a currency, and someone's cashing in on it. The more emotionally available you are, the more you explain yourself, the more consistent your reactions become. The easier it is for others to manipulate you. They don't need to control you directly. They just need to learn your patterns. Push a little guilt here, add a bit of silence there, trigger a response, wait for you to react. You think you're clarifying to avoid conflict, but often you're just walking into a script they've already written for you. Carl Jung called this projection, when people refuse to see their own shadow and instead assign it to you. So suddenly, you're not quiet, you're passive-aggressive, you're not busy, you're selfish, you're not setting boundaries, you're cold, and instead of saying, "That's not mine," you jump in to fix their distorted image of you. You explain, you defend, you contort. That's the trap. People who project onto you need you to stay reactive, because your defensiveness gives them validation. It confirms their bias. It keeps them from having to look at themselves. But when you stop engaging, when you go quiet, neutral, inward, they lose access to your emotional script, and without it, their illusion falls apart. Your silence isn't confusing, it's confronting, and most people don't want clarity. They want control. So the moment you stop offering your emotional map, the game ends, and the mask falls. That's the power of strategic silence. It doesn't just shift the energy, it reveals who was only comfortable when you were easy to manage. Silence is not weakness, it's not avoidance, and it's definitely not a lack of clarity. Real silence, the strategic kind, is presence amplified. It's the version of you that's done broadcasting your every move just to keep the peace. Because when you go quiet, the balance shifts. You're no longer reacting, you're no longer defending, you're observing, and that alone is power. People who depended on your immediate responses, they'll start to feel the space, not because you disappeared, but because they no longer have access to the emotional validation they fed on. They'll call you cold, distant, hard to read, but really, you've just stopped playing the game where emotional labor is expected and never reciprocated. There's strength in no longer needing to clarify. There's authority in letting others sit in their own discomfort. There's peace in choosing your response on your time, if you choose to respond at all. Silence makes people reveal themselves. When you stop reacting, their projections echo. Their confusion speaks louder than your explanation ever could. And here's what's truly powerful. Silence doesn't demand attention. It commands it. You no longer chase, you no longer explain. You hold your ground, not with force, but with stillness. And that's when the energy shifts. That's when people feel the absence of your over-explaining, like a void they can't fill. That's when they realize you were never just quiet. You were in control. Comment below, "I protect my energy." Say it like you mean it. Because this is the moment we stop being predictable and start being powerful. This isn't just about silence. It's about choosing who you show up for. Who deserves your time, your words, your presence. When you protect your energy, you're saying, I won't be an emotional mirror for those unwilling to face their own shadows. I won't fall into old patterns of over-explaining just to avoid discomfort. I won't let anyone control me through my reactions. This is the part where you claim your emotional sovereignty, where you move from reaction to response, where you decide who gets to access your inner world and who doesn't. Say it for the you who's tired of the emotional exhaustion. Say it for the you who's ready to set clear boundaries without guilt. Say it for the you who understands that power lies in presence, not in defense. If you're ready to step into that power, type, I protect my energy. Let's build a space where silence is strength and where we all thrive. This isn't loneliness, it's sacred space. When you step away from the noise, the need to explain, defend, or justify, you create room for something rare. A quiet sanctuary where you can finally hear yourself. Not the you shaped by others' expectations. Not the you reacting to every demand, but the true you. Transformation often feels like isolation because the old roles you played begin to fade. People around you may not understand the space you're creating. Some may leave, uncomfortable with the new boundaries. But that's not loss, that's release. You're not losing people. You're losing the roles you were never meant to play. The emotional labor you carried to keep peace. The version of yourself that begged for approval. Sacred solitude is about honoring your own process. It's about giving yourself permission to be misunderstood, to be silent when others demand noise, to heal in the stillness instead of fixing in the chaos. This space isn't empty, it's fertile. It's where you grow roots, where you reclaim your power, where you learn to trust your own company. So don't fear the quiet. Lean into it. Because in sacred solitude you become whole. You don't chase anymore, you don't explain, you don't shrink to fit anyone's expectations. You've become rare, whole, unforgettable. This is the rebirth that comes from choosing yourself over approval, from stepping into your power through silence rather than noise, from shedding the old skin of people-pleasing, over-explaining, and emotional exhaustion. You've learned that your value isn't defined by how loudly you defend it. It's found in your presence, steady, calm, and unwavering. You've become the kind of person who doesn't need to prove worthiness because it's already undeniable. This transformation isn't just about behavior. It's a shift in identity. From someone who bends and explains to someone who stands tall and is. You've integrated the lessons of past pain without letting them define your future. You're no longer a mirror for others' insecurities. You're a beacon of your own truth. This new you moves through the world with quiet confidence. You speak only when necessary. You respond instead of react. You guard your energy fiercely but lovingly. And in that sacred space of self-possession, you find freedom. Freedom from needing to explain. Freedom from the exhaustion of defending your worth. You've become whole. And the world can't help but notice. If you made it this far, you're ready. Ready to be misunderstood. Ready to be alone. But finally, ready to be free. Write in the comments, I choose myself. This isn't just a phrase, it's a declaration. A commitment to stop defending who you are, to stop chasing validation from those unwilling to give it, to protect your energy and reclaim your power. You're not walking this path alone. There's a tribe here, quietly growing, people who've chosen presence over reaction, peace over chaos, strength over approval. This is where the fire refines us, where we burn away old patterns and emerge stronger, clearer, and more whole. If you feel that spark inside, that call to break free from the endless cycle of explanation and defense, say it loud, I choose myself. Let's see how many of us are walking out of the fire, together, because the journey is hard, but the destination is worth it. And it begins with this simple choice,